Hey, hey, Disney fans, planners, and reluctant visitors. I'm Becky, and this is Touring Plans Teaches. This week, we've got Walt Disney World Touring Strategy episode 103. This is going to be sort of the last of our lessons before we can really hop into the deep strategy, how to avoid crowds when you're touring the parks. Last week, we talked about times of year to visit to avoid the crowds, and this week we're going to talk time of day, so we're zooming in to a much more micro level. If you've ever heard the term rope drop and wondered what that means, or if you want to know if you have to wake up really early or stay up really late in order to avoid the crowds, this is going to be the episode for you. We're going to keep it pretty short and sweet, give you some definitions, and of course, a little bit of data to help you understand how you're going to avoid the crowds during the day at Walt Disney World. We're going to work our way chronologically through the day, and that means starting with early entry. So if you check your app and see which time each park opens on any given day, 30 minutes before that time, all of those same 4 parks are going to open to select guests. Those guests are the ones that are staying at on-site Disney resorts, that includes the Swan and Dolphin and Shades of Green, and select Good Neighbor resorts. These are hotels typically in the Disney Springs area that have worked out a deal to let their guests also get in early. 30 minutes doesn't sound like a lot, but it can mean huge time savings throughout your day because only certain people can get in during this time, and a lot of people don't want to wake up this early anyway. For example, Animal Kingdom during the summer could open at 8 a.m. every day, and that means early entry starts at 7:30. Wow. And Hollywood Studios has been opening to regular day guests at 8:30 throughout the summer, which means early entry there would start at 8 a.m. But at Hollywood Studios specifically, early entry typically starts even earlier than that. They just don't advertise it. So this is a good tip for this week. If you want to do early entry at Hollywood Studios, I would suggest getting to the park by 7:15. So early entry would technically start at 8 a.m. You need to get there at 7:15 to get through security, because they tend to open the gates at 7:30. You can get in, and Rise of the Resistance typically starts running by about 7:40 in the morning, and they'll let guests on. Every other attraction in the park tends to stay down until closer to 8 when early entry actually starts. But if you head to Rise of the Resistance, you can get in line early and have a short wait for one of the attractions that typically has the longest wait during the day. But no matter which park you go to, as long as you're there those 30 minutes before park opening, you'll be able to avoid lots of waits at many of the major attractions. Now, early entry can sometimes be confused with rope drop, and sometimes now they're even interchangeable. But rope drop used to refer to that regular park opening. And it's really a physical rope that everyone stands behind. And when official park opening happens, they drop the rope and you can go to your attractions. So they have this same rope for early entry now, but rope drop really means sort of when you can start your day. So we'll call official park opening that rope drop. You're still going to have pretty low-ish crowds, but you're not going to have the 0 standby crowds that the people at the very front of the early entry pack get to have. All those Disney resort guests that have been there for 30 minutes already are filling up those standby queues, so you're going to be behind all of them. But you're still beating a lot of the people that aren't early risers, so you're going to still have less standby waits than if you waited later in the day. That takes us to the rest of these morning hours. So often you're going to see parks opening between 8, 8:30, 9, especially Magic Kingdom 9's pretty regular. And then the rest of the morning we'll say lasts until about 11 a.m. You're going to see increasing crowds throughout this time as people wake up, eat their breakfast, finally catch a bus, and get to the resorts. So the earlier you can get there in the morning is going to be better. Our peak hours at every park, typically, are from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. These are sort of those core hours, just like if you were out on a regular work day. A lot of people, 11 to 5 are those core, I know everyone's going to be here, I'm going to have all the meetings. At Disney World, that's when everyone's going to be there trying to ride all of the attractions. You're going to have the longest lines, it's going to be the hottest part of the day. This is when you're going to want to zig while everyone else is zagging. You want to do the major attractions not during these peak hours and do things like shows, entertainment, Tom Sawyer Island and Magic Kingdom, things that don't have lines, so everyone else can fill up the lines and you get to enjoy the line-free things to do in the theme parks. Thankfully, in the evening, things start calming back down again, so you're going to have decreasing crowds. It's not going to go as quick, so in the morning, things ramp up pretty quickly. In the evening, crowds more like filter out because you have those major nighttime spectaculars at most of the parks, other than Animal Kingdom, that are going to entice people to stay longer and see the fireworks. But families with young kids might tire out and go back to their resorts, so you'll see some decreasing crowds throughout the evening hours. If you stay until after the nighttime spectaculars, you're going to have even lower waits because as soon as the fireworks are over, typically everyone rushes home. If you're a deluxe resort guest, and this really is only Disney resorts, and that includes Swan and Dolphin and the Shades of Green, but no Good Neighbor hotels, you can stay for extended evening theme park hours. These are more rare than early entry. Early entry happens every day, every park. Extended evenings happen one day a week at Magic Kingdom and Epcot, so typically on a Monday and Wednesday. So if you time your stay right, you could do both of them with just like a 1 or 2 night stay in a deluxe resort if you're into the resort hopping thing. These are great ways to save times in the park, especially at Magic Kingdom. Epcot's a little harder because everything's so spread out. 2 hours sounds like a lot of time, but when you're spending 60 minutes of that walking in between the different attractions, you don't have that much time to actually wait in line and experience attractions. But at Magic Kingdom, you can hit a lot that are nearby and maybe shorter duration and save a lot of time. These are the lowest crowds that you're going to experience, especially if it's been a rainy day or if Magic Kingdom is open really late, like to 11 p.m. or midnight, and then you're staying 2 hours after that. No one wants to stay up that late. So you'll have very clear lines and can ride everything in a short amount of time. Now, that was a lot of words across a lot of different slides, so let's take a look at what this actually looks like on an example attraction. You can find this data on the Disney World crowd calendar. You can actually click down to specific attractions. So I'm looking at the predictions for Seven Dwarfs Mine Train for July 9th, which is the day after this episode drops on YouTube. So here I can see sort of that trend that I was talking about. This is a day when Magic Kingdom is going to open at 9 o'clock. So from 8:30, which is when early entry starts, to 9 o'clock, we've got a pretty sharp increase in wait times. They start out really low, but they get high really quickly. That's because a lot of those early entry people are going to Seven Dwarfs Mine Train and hoping they can beat the crowds there. Then even after the park opens, they continue to increase. So we see that morning increase, the rope droppers, and then people filtering in throughout the morning. But once we hit 11 o'clock or noon, things start to peak. They're at their highest wait times and they stay that way for a while. Then once we get to 6 p.m. in this case, 5 or 6 p.m. is pretty typical, they start to go down again, but not as quickly as they increased. A lot of people are staying in the park and hoping to hit this ride either right before or after fireworks. This isn't an extended evening hours time, so we're not going to see the big drop-off where you can take advantage of the really low waits, but if it was, you'd see that sort of at the tail end there too. But not every attraction looks at this, and this is the whole reason we're doing a touring strategy series of this Touring Plans Teaches, because the nuance and the way you sort of beat the system is by knowing all of these curves for all of the attractions and taking advantage of their different peaks and valleys. Thankfully, Touring Plans does most of that work for you, but it helps to understand some of it. So let's take a look at Flight of Passage on this same day instead of Seven Dwarfs Mine Train. I've still got sort of a peak and then it filtering off, but this looks different. I can see that it starts earlier in the day and it increases much more rapidly, but then its peak is really short and then it starts filtering off and tapering off over into the evening. I'd be willing to bet it tapers way more than this chart shows too. But this is because Animal Kingdom opens a lot earlier than other parks. People tend to hit a few attractions and then park hop to other parks where they're going to stay for the evening. Because unlike all of the other parks, Animal Kingdom doesn't have any nighttime entertainment to keep people there. So they'll go, hit the attractions, and then leave, and so wait times don't have that drawn out peak like they do at most of the other parks. So this is just one example. Every attraction has its own sort of pattern and they change from day to day based on different circumstances, but it's by taking advantage of all of these that we're going to be able to figure out the best strategy for you. We already talked about early entry and extended evening hours as being the best ways to avoid crowds. That's where your lowest wait times are going to be. Of course, they both mean either staying up late or getting up early, but if you want to avoid the crowds, that's what you're going to do. You also have to be a Disney resort guest to take advantage of these. But what's the advantage of that? Can we quantify it? Yes, we can. Yay, data. I love it. So let's look at extended evening hours first, because this only impacts 2 parks so far. First is Magic Kingdom. Magic Kingdom, like I talked about earlier, is a great place to do extended evenings because there are so many attractions that are open and they're all close to each other, so you can hit a lot of them and save a lot of time. For example, if you do about 10 attractions during extended evening theme park hours, which is definitely doable, you can save 3 to 4 hours or sometimes even more compared to doing those same attractions during regular park hours. That's a huge amount of time. That's roughly equivalent to what you can save by using Genie Plus during a day at Magic Kingdom. So pay the $15 for Genie Plus or pay to stay at a deluxe resort. Your choice. But you can save a lot of time this way. At Epcot, it's a lot harder because the major attractions that have lengthy waits are very spread out. They also have longer durations, so you're going to be on Frozen Ever After for a while, or you're going to be on Soarin' through a whole show, and so it's a lot harder to save a lot of time during those short 2 hours. So there you're only going to save about 90 minutes if you can do 5 attractions in those 2 hours, and even that's going to be a rush. You're going to be walking around a lot and very quickly. It's actually easier to save time other ways at Epcot, but if you like touring the evening, it's a good way to save time at Epcot too. Now let's talk about early entry. This is my favorite way to save time in the park because I find that it's easier to get up early in the morning than stay up late at night. So with early entry, this is one of the best ways to save time, especially at Animal Kingdom and Epcot. Epcot specifically, you're going to save more time with early entry than you would with extended evening theme park hours or even with Genie Plus. So early entry, really key to Epcot. We're going to talk all about that in a future episode. At Magic Kingdom and Hollywood Studios, you can again save a lot of time. But typically, under most crowd conditions, you can save even more time with Genie Plus. That being said, you have to pay more for Genie Plus, so it may be worth it just to do early entry instead if you want to hit a couple of those major attractions before all the crowds come filtering in. I want to talk about one specific example, again, to help you quantify this. So we actually sent a couple of teams of people to Hollywood Studios on a crowd level 8 day. So it actually ended up being an actual crowd level 8 day. This is pretty crowded. We sent them with the goal of doing the same 6 attractions, which are the 6 attractions that have the highest waits at Hollywood Studios, and we sent one at early entry and one at regular rope drop, so that official park opening, to see what the difference would be. We also let them sort of optimize their touring plans while they were there. So what does that mean? That meant they were sent to the attractions with the lowest waits after every attraction. So they were refiguring out and seeing where the data was sending them. So they both sort of went the ideal way they could go given the time that they entered the park. You can see on the screen here the results for the early entry team. So they went in and they followed that Hollywood Studios goal of getting to Rise of the Resistance before early entry even started. And once they got there, they only had a 13-minute wait. That's pretty unheard of. Usually it's something like 10 times that. So that was a really good start to the morning. Then they immediately hopped over to Toy Story Land and got on Slinky Dog Dash with just a 23-minute wait. Again, you're going to usually see waits well over an hour for most of the day, typically over 90 minutes. 23 minutes is really good. Then they went to Toy Story Mania. By this point, it was already after official park opening, so crowds were starting to roll in, and that meant their wait at Toy Story Mania was a little bit longer. It was 32 minutes. We can see these wait times starting to increase. After they got done with Toy Story Land, they went to Runaway Railway, which had a 49-minute wait. And then finally they went down Sunset Boulevard, and they went to Rock and Roller Coaster first with a 39-minute wait, and then Tower of Terror. Tower of Terror is when things kind of went off the rails. Tower of Terror is having a stealthy refurbishment right now, where one elevator shaft is under refurbishment and the other one's up, so it's operating at half capacity. Because they got there so late in their plan, they had almost an hour and a half of waiting, which was frustrating for our team. But they did finish all 6 attractions just around lunchtime, so that's really not that bad for Hollywood studios. Let's compare that to the experience of our regular rope drop team, which was not as great. So immediately off the bat, right at rope drop, they went to Rise of the Resistance, because that was predicted to just increase throughout the rest of the morning and early afternoon. They got there and the posted wait time was already 200 minutes, and the actual wait time was expected to be over 2 hours. They made the judgment call to bail. I probably would have too. So after they scratched that off their list and said maybe we'll come back to it later, they re-optimized and went to Runaway Railway. Runaway Railway at that point already had a 41-minute wait. So they beat the early entry team, who eventually had a 49-minute wait for this attraction, but as their first ride of the day, this isn't ideal. After they finished Runaway Railway, they went to Toy Story Land next. They started with Toy Story Mania, which had a 52-minute wait, so they waited almost an hour for Toy Story Mania, and then went to Slinky Dog Dash, where they waited over an hour and a half for that attraction. Pretty typical as a standby wait. Then, Rise of the Resistance still had really crazy wait times, so they made their way over to Rock and Roller Coaster, and by that time, it had an hour and a half wait. Now, at this point, our regular rope drop team was already well after lunch, and they decided they just weren't even going to bother trying Tower of Terror, which had posted wait times of well over 2 hours. Rise of the Resistance was the same way. So this was a pretty ugly morning at Hollywood Studios, trying to do those major attractions and not having much luck, having a pretty miserable time and a lot of long lines. If we compare those numbers, we'll see that with those same 6 attractions, the early entry team was able to complete all 6 of them, but they waited 4 hours total to do it. That's still a lot of waiting. Genie Plus probably would have been helpful here. Our rope drop team was only able to do 4 attractions, and they waited 279 minutes for all of those, so they waited much more time and didn't complete nearly as many attractions. So we can see here the value of early entry. This was a surprisingly crowded day at Hollywood Studios. Had they stacked some Genie Plus reservations, they probably would have had a better evening, and in fact, that's what they did. But we can tell that early entry is definitely preferable to regular rope drop. It may allow you to do attractions that you otherwise wouldn't even be able to do with the crazy standby times of peak hours. There we have it. Now we've got our foundation of all the terms we need to know and some of the foundational data to help us get into these strategies to save time on your vacation. Next week, so this episode drops on July 8th, on July 15th, we're going to cover early entry strategies for 2 of the theme parks. And then on July 22nd, we're going to cover early entry strategies for the other 2. You don't want to go into early entry with no plan. You might end up rope dropping It's a Small World, and you'll spend your whole 30 minutes just going on that boat ride. You want to know the right attractions to take advantage of those low wait times. So we're going to cover all 4 theme parks over the next 2 weeks so that you'll have those strategies and plans ready to go. Then we're going to be taking a 2-week break because my family has our summer vacation, and we're going to be using some of this information on our vacation to save time for us too. Thanks for joining us this week, and I'll talk to you again soon.